The acid rain screamed against the hull as Elias's pod plummeted through the crimson atmosphere of Kethra 7. Warning klaxons shrieked in his ears, but he could barely hear them over the deafening roar of atmospheric entry. His hands flew across the controls, desperately trying to stabilize the descent, but the navigation systems were fried from the solar flare that had knocked him off course. "Come on, come on," he muttered through gritted teeth. Watching the alien surface rush up to meet him a nightmare. Landscape of jagged obsidian rocks and pools of hissing liquid that bubbled ominously under the perpetual storm. The impact slammed him forward against the harness. Metal shrieked. Glass shattered. Then everything went dark. When consciousness flickered back, Elias tasted blood. His vision swam as he tried to focus on the cracked viewport. Through the spider-webbed glass, he could see the acidic rain eating away at the pod's exterior plating, small wisps of smoke rising where droplets found purchase. He had minutes, maybe less, before the hull gave way completely. He fumbled with the harness release, his fingers numb and clumsy. A deep gash across his shoulder sent waves of agony through his body as he moved. The release finally clicked, and he tumbled forward onto the tilted floor. Outside, the storm intensified, the rain now drumming against the pod like 1,000 hammering fists. Elias crawled toward the emergency hatch, leaving a trail of blood behind him. His survival suit was compromised. He could feel the cold air seeping through a tear along his ribs. If he went out there without proper protection, the acid would strip flesh from bone in seconds. But if he stayed, he'd die when the pod dissolved around him. The choice was made for him when a section of the viewport gave way with a sharp crack. Toxic rain began to drip inside, sizzling where it hit metal. Elias screamed as a droplet landed on his exposed hand, burning like molten metal. Then, through the remaining intact portion of the viewport, he saw her, a figure moving through the storm with impossible grace, her navy blue skin seeming to repel the deadly rain. Blonde hair, plastered to her head and shoulders, glowed faintly in the dim light. Their eyes met for just a moment. Hers were a striking silver, wide with something that looked like surprise, or perhaps recognition. She hesitated, standing motionless in the downpour, and Elias thought she might leave him to die. Then something shifted in her expression. She moved toward the pod with sudden purpose, her movements fluid despite the hostile environment. The last thing Elias saw before darkness claimed him again was her face pressed against the viewport, those silver eyes studying him with an intensity that burned brighter than any pain. He felt the pod shift as she began to force open the hatch, felt strong hands grip his shoulders. And then he was being dragged through mud and acid rain, into an unknown fate, warmth. That was the first sensation that penetrated Elias's consciousness. Blessed, dry warmth. He became aware of softness beneath him, not the cold metal of the pod, but something yielding, almost organic. His eyes fluttered open to dim blue-green bioluminescence that pulsed gently from crystalline formations embedded in rough stone walls. "Easy," a voice said, melodic and accented with alien inflections. "Your wounds need time." Elias turned his head, wincing at the spike of pain in his shoulder, and found her kneeling beside him. Up close, she was breathtaking. Her navy blue skin had a subtle iridescence to it, catching the bioglow light and reflecting it in shifting patterns. Her blonde hair, now dry, fell in waves past her shoulders, framing a face that was both familiar and utterly foreign. High cheekbones, a delicate nose, lips that were fuller than a human's, and those mesmerizing silver eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "You saved me," he rasped, his throat raw. "I did something foolish," she replied, but there was no harshness in her tone. She reached for a bowl beside her, filled with a luminescent paste that glowed softly green. "This will help with the burns." As she leaned closer, Elias caught her scent, something like ozone and wildflowers, sharp and sweet simultaneously. Her fingers were gentle as they spread the paste across the acid burns on his hand. The relief was immediate, a cooling sensation that chased away the fire in his flesh. "What's your name?" he asked, studying her face as she worked. She paused, those silver eyes flicking up to meet his. "Arya. And you?" "Elias." He managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Arya, for the foolish thing." A ghost of a smile touched her lips before she returned her attention to his wounds. "You're far from your kind. What brings a human to Kethra 7? Survey mission. Or it was supposed to be." He gestured vaguely toward where he assumed the surface was. "Solar flare fried my systems. I wasn't even supposed to enter atmosphere. Just orbital scans." He watched her carefully apply the healing paste to the gash on his shoulder. Her touch feather-light despite the strength he'd felt when she dragged him to safety. "What about you? Do you live here alone?" The question made her pause. Something vulnerable flickered across her features before her expression shuddered. "Yes, alone. For 3 cycles now." 3 cycles, Elias repeated. 3 years? Close enough. That's a long time to be isolated. Arya's hand stilled on his shoulder. When she looked at him again, there was a depth of loneliness in her eyes that made his chest ache. Isolation keeps you safe. Keeps you from making mistakes like rescuing dying strangers. Is that what I am? Elias asked softly. A mistake? She held his gaze for a long moment, and he swore he saw her pulse quicken at the base of her throat. "Ask me again when you're healed," she whispered, then rose gracefully to her feet. "Rest now. The storms will rage for days yet. You're not going anywhere." The days blurred together in Arya's shelter, marked only by the distant rumble of acid storms above and the steady pulse of bioluminescent light. Elias's wounds healed with remarkable speed under Arya's ministrations, her bioglow herbs proving far more effective than any human medicine he'd known. But it wasn't just his body that was healing. On the 3rd day, when he was strong enough to sit up without dizziness, Arya brought him a bowl of warm stew made from underground fungi and protein extracts from her hydroponic garden. They ate together in comfortable silence, but Elias noticed how she kept stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. "Tell me about your world," she said suddenly, setting her bowl aside. "What is Earth like?" Elias smiled, memories flooding back. Loud, crowded, beautiful in its chaos. He described azure oceans and green forests, cities of glass and steel that touched the clouds, the laughter of children in parks, the smell of rain on summer pavement. As he spoke, Arya drew closer, her silver eyes wide with wonder until their shoulders were nearly touching. "It sounds like paradise," she whispered. "It has its problems," Elias admitted, "but it's home." Or it was. He turned to look at her, suddenly aware of the warmth radiating from her skin. "What about your world? Where did you come from?" Arya's expression dimmed. "Kelfaria. It was similar to your Earth in some ways. We had oceans too purple under our twin suns. Crystal cities built into cliffsides." Her voice caught. "But the plague came. It swept through our population in months. I was off-world studying xenobiology on a research station when the quarantine was declared. By the time they lifted it," she swallowed hard, "there was nothing left to return to." Without thinking, Elias reached out and took her hand. Her skin was smooth, slightly cooler than his own, and when their fingers intertwined, he felt a strange tingle of energy pass between them. Arya gasped softly, her eyes widening. "Elias, I'm sorry," he said, but he didn't let go. "For your loss. For your loneliness." They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, something unspoken building in the space between them. Arya's thumb traced small circles on the back of his hand, and Elias felt his pulse quicken. When he looked up, he found her watching his lips with an intensity that made his breath catch. "This is dangerous," she whispered, but she was leaning closer. "What is?" "This. You? The way you make me feel ... Her free hand came up to touch his face, fingertips tracing the line of his jaw with reverent curiosity. "I told myself I would stay alone, that it was safer, simpler." Elias turned his head slightly, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Maybe simple isn't always better." Arya's breath hitched. "Elias, there are things you don't understand. Things about my people." "Then help me understand," he murmured, bringing his hand up to brush a strand of blonde hair from her face. "Help me understand why being close to you feels like the first right thing since I crashed on this world." That night, as the storms raged with renewed fury above, Elias woke to find Arya standing by the shelter's entrance, her silhouette limned in bioglow light. Something was wrong. Her posture was too rigid, her breathing too deliberate. "Arya?" He rose from his bedding, moving to her side. "What is it?" She didn't turn to look at him. "Your distress beacon. I found it in your pod wreckage. I've been charging it with my generator." Her voice was hollow. "It's ready now. You can signal your people. They'll come for you." Ilias's heart should have leaped at the news. Rescue. Return to humanity. But instead, a cold dread settled in his stomach. That's good news, is it?" Now she did turn, and the anguish in her silver eyes stole his breath. "Elias, I need to tell you something. About what I did when I saved you." She led him deeper into the shelter, to a small pool of water that glowed with its own internal light. The surface was mirror smooth, and when Arya gestured for him to look, Elias saw his reflection, but it wasn't quite right. There was a faint luminescence to his skin now, barely perceptible, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. And there, just visible beneath his chest, was a web of light connecting to ... He looked at Arya and saw the same pattern glowing beneath her navy blue skin. Threads of energy that seemed to reach toward him. "What is this?" He breathed. "A bond," Arya said, her voice breaking. "My species. We don't heal the way yours does. When we save a life, we share our essence. It's not a choice, it's biological. When I brought you here, when I used my healing abilities to save you from the acid burns and internal damage," she wrapped her arms around herself, "I tethered my life force to yours." Elias stared at the glowing patterns, his mind reeling. "What does that mean?" "It means we're connected now. Our hearts beat in synchrony. Our life forces sustain each other." Tears gathered in her silver eyes. "It means if you leave, if you get on that rescue ship and travel beyond this planet's gravity well, the distance will sever the bond. And I will ... double quote she couldn't finish. "Die," Elias whispered, horror and realization crashing over him. "Fade," Arya corrected softly. "Over weeks, maybe months. My essence will slowly dissipate without its anchor." She looked away, shame and guilt written across her beautiful features. "I didn't know it would happen. The bond usually only forms between my people, and even then, it requires conscious intent. But you were dying, and I was so desperate to save you, and somehow ... She laughed bitterly. "Somehow my body made a choice my mind never would have." Elias reached for her, pulling her against his chest. He could feel it now, the way their heartbeats synchronized, the subtle pull of energy between them. "How long have you known?" "Since the first day," she confessed into his shoulder. "When you woke up, I felt the connection solidify. I've been trying to find a way to tell you, but..." Her fingers clutched at his shirt. "But I couldn't bear to see the look in your eyes when you realized I've trapped you here. The beacon sat between them like an accusation, its ready light blinking steadily in the darkness. Elias stared then at Arya, who stood with her back to him, her blonde hair cascading down her shoulders like a waterfall of light against her navy blue skin. "You're thinking of leaving," she said quietly. "I can feel your conflict through the bond." "I'm thinking," Elias admitted, "about what I'm leaving behind versus what I'm walking toward." He stood, crossing the distance between them in 3 strides. When he reached her, he turned her gently to face him. "My crew believes I'm dead by now. My family held a memorial months ago, according to the timeline. Earth has 1,000 scientists, 1,000,000 explorers." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that spilled down her cheeks. "But this universe has only one Arya." "Elias, no, you can't." "I can," he interrupted, his voice fierce with certainty. "I've spent my whole life reaching for the stars, searching for something meaningful out here in the void. And I found it. I found you." He pressed his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. "You saved my life. You gave me shelter, healed my wounds, showed me kindness when you could have left me to die. You shared your story, your loneliness, your hope." His hands slid down to her shoulders, then her waist, pulling her closer. "Did you really think I could just walk away from that? From you? But your world will survive without one more explorer." He smiled, even as his own tears began to fall. "But I won't survive without you. Not anymore. Not after I've felt what it's like to be connected to someone so completely." Arya's sob was muffled against his chest as she collapsed into his arms. "You'll hate me eventually. You'll resent being trapped here. I could never hate you." Elias tilted her chin up, meeting those luminous silver eyes. "And I'm not trapped. I'm choosing. There's a difference." He kissed her then, soft and tentative at first, tasting the salt of her tears and something else, something electric and alive that sparked between them. Arya gasped against his mouth, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair. And the bond between them flared bright enough to cast shadows on the shelter walls. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elias picked up the beacon. Arya's eyes widened in alarm, but he simply smiled and crushed it beneath his boot, the ready light dying with a final sputter. "No rescue," he said firmly. "No leaving. Just us." Arya launched herself into his arms, and they tumbled onto the bedding together, laughing and crying simultaneously. Above them, the storms continued to rage, but inside the shelter, wrapped in each other's arms with their hearts beating as one, Elias had never felt more at home. "Forever?" Arya whispered against his lips. "Forever," Elias promised, sealing his vow with another kiss as their intertwined life forces pulsed with brilliant light. "My heart for yours through every storm that comes."